All right, here we go.
We've got some
Hey,
fresh
I'm
new young
Luis.
talent
And I'm
doing some
Luis.
things that I know
You're
you
listening to the
haven't heard
Content is
before.
Profit podcast.
And we spent the last 4 years learning the strategies and techniques from some of the top marketers in the world on how to create content that turns into profit.
If you'd like to learn how to turn that content into profit, you can go to contentisprofit.com. Oh, yeah, baby.
Oh yeah, baby.
Yes.
I think we need to update that intro because we wrote it a year ago and it still says 4 years.
I know, it's 5 years
So
now. 5 years.
we do need to update that
Time
intro.
flies,
but
baby.
guys,
Time flies.
today
Tell me more.
we have an epic set of guests.
Ooh.
And we're gonna be talking about podcast monetization. Is it an art? Is it a science? What is it? I don't know. We're gonna
Is it
discover
maybe a
today.
mix of both?
Maybe.
Is it either or? So good.
I know.
love it.
I can't wait.
All right, guys, go ahead and follow the show in your favorite platform. Just hit follow. And,
I think you skipped one part.
I know. Hold on. I'm gonna ask you after. Why you always have to do this, Fonzie? Well, tell me what is the part that I just skipped.
You missed the sponsorship time.
No way. Tell me more.
Yes.
That's the whole strategy. I just
Great
wanted you to tell me.
question. Great question. Thank you. Today's sponsor is your own, the BIZBROS.
Yes, let's go.
We sponsor our own podcast with content momentum. And you
right.
might be asking yourself, what is content momentum? Well, if you produce a long form piece of content, just like this podcast that you're listening to or watching, and you want to turn it into multiple pieces of content that you can share all across social media. We
baby.
are that modern media team that can come into your business and help you do just that. So
That's right, guys.
if that sounds what we call #juicy and you're interested, don't forget to slide in the DMs at BIZBROS Co on Facebook, on Instagram.
So good, Fonzie.
Appreciate
and
it.
now you can, if this episode is impactful, which I'm sure it will be, make sure you share it with your loved ones. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review, guys. It does help the show. It does help you. It does help everybody. So win, 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 win. Oh, so good. I stole your part.
Yeah, you're
And
taking over my parts.
I mean, you give me reminders, I'll steal your parts. All right, whatever. Content is profit on a Tuesday. Yes, that's right. Not just that. Today we are doing another 2v2. We met today's guest through a mastermind that we're both in. Put yourself out there, guys. My friends. Yes, that's right. Put yourself out there. You never know who you might end up meeting.
Oh yeah, and they are not just the OGs of podcasting cool kids clubs. They are at the forefront of the podcasting industry as a whole. They help entrepreneurs produce their podcasts and create, sell, and scale their businesses through the Dream Client Podcast Funnel Formula. Ooh, this is so juicy. I can't wait to hear more about that.
Absolutely epic. These two have incredible individual track records, scale a business from $0 to $500,000 in 12 months using an all-organic strategy. Number 15 of the top 50 moms in podcasting by Podcast Magazine. And now they have joined forces to bring My Podcast Coach to the world.
Guys, there is so much more we could share, but luckily, we need to get this party started.
Yeah.
So please welcome co-founders of My Podcast Coach, the OGs of podcasting and monetization, Michelle and Evans. Welcome, guys.
Hey, what's happening?
Thanks for having us here. This is awesome. I was killing myself laughing at your guys' intro. I love it.
I know. It
You
goes
can
south
tell-
all the time.
You can tell we're brothers because of all the discussion and fighting that happens during the intro and before the show.
I
Yeah.
love it. I started my podcast with my brother too. It was awesome. Yeah.
So we'll
That's cool.
we'll dive into that. But
Yeah.
Michelle and Evans, I mean, we're extremely lucky to have you guys here. Super fun fact, by the way, Evans, one of the first-ish months that we were in business, we're actually processing one of your episodes with Lisanne Murphy. So when we joined in the mastermind, we were like, oh my goodness, this is so cool that we now get to share some time with you guys. And now we're having this incredible conversation. Yep. Michelle did not get the chance to edit any content with you, but we got the chance to share some stuff in the mastermind as well. So you guys have been doing incredible things in the space.
Yeah, before we dive into the first question here, because there's so many things you guys have accomplished, and I really want to share them with the public so they know you guys are the real OGs of podcasting, right? I mean, we mentioned Evans, that's to 500,000 in 12 months in all organic strategy. That is incredible. And the following year, that business crossed the 7-figure and was later sold. One of your podcasting trainings have been licensed and featured in ClickFunnels, which is incredible, right? Absolutely amazing. And I think this is the best one of all. You are an incredible father of a 10-year-old and a husband. I mean, I love when entrepreneurs share about their family. That is incredible.
For those watching the video, we have some awesome paintings in the background. I love when people share their family.
I know. I love it. I love it. And Michelle, you have won Entrepreneur of the Year 2020, like we mentioned, number 15 of the top 50 moms in podcasting by Podcast Magazine, and you've launched over 200 shows in the last 3 years. So I just wanted to mention that so people on the other side that are listening to this, right, the listener, understand that you guys are the real deal when it comes to podcasting. And I can't wait to dive into this. But there's one more fact that I love that I want to share. And is that, Michelle, you drive your kids to the bus stop in a boat every time. How cool is that? I love that. Are you guys currently adopting someone? Because, just saying.
We're taking applications. Don't worry.
Yes. So
Awesome.
guys, why don't you share a little bit of your start as entrepreneurs, right? I'm assuming they're different path, and then you guys found each other, right? So, I mean, who wants to go first?
Evans, you go first.
Oh, good. Yeah, let the old guy go first, right? So, what's funny is I didn't really reflect a lot on my start as an entrepreneur until I started doing podcast interviews and it started coming out a lot more, right? Because I sort of look back and I think, oh, well, yeah, I was doing this like 4 or 5 years ago. But then I actually went back and looked in the Wayback Machine in archive.org and I found my very first website, the first business I created online. This was 20 years ago, back before YouTube, before Facebook, any of this stuff. And it was a local, sort of like a local e-commerce business where I was a personal trainer and I actually went and got my clients and people that I met who did things like they were artists, they were craftsmen, and I created this site called Charleston Arts, etc. And I sold their stuff through this website for a commission. So that sort of got me into the online world. And it's been 20 years since then. But then I sold that business and started sort of stumbling forward, and then eventually found myself in this podcasting world 20 years later. So yeah, it's been a crazy journey. That's the very abridged version. So I'm keeping it short and tight, right?
Absolutely. And don't worry, for you that are listening right now, we're gonna leave all the links right below of their shows, their personal stories, everything that they're sharing, so you guys can deep dive into that,
into their world.
Yes. So now, Michelle, how does it start with you? In British Columbia, were you always in British Columbia? How was that bug born?
Well, actually, the second I graduated high school, I was on a plane to Switzerland where I lived for a year, and then 47 countries, a lot of backpacking, scuba diving, bungee jumping, you name it, skydiving. I landed back in Canada. So my 20s were a little bit of a blur and a lot of fun, and spent every Wednesday night in the Caribbean on some island because I was working on cruise ships. So lots of crazy things. But I always knew I wanted to have my own business. And funny enough, Evans and I both started in the fitness industry. So I had my own fitness studio. It was called Evolve Fitness, and then it turned into Storm Fitness, and then it evolved and exploded across our province and many boot camp locations. And then I had a family, and my little guy was amazing, but I realized that I can't bring him in a bucket to all my personal training sessions. I could when he was in a bucket in a little car seat, I can carry him around. But then when he started running, I was like, this is probably not fair on my clients because he's doing all the exercises right along with them and they're paying for it. And so it kind of got a bit awkward. So I opened a co-working space where people could come and start their businesses. And then I had somewhere to go and work when I was out of the house, so I could then leave my son at the daycare and go work somewhere. And it was this amazing co-working space. But again, too, too ahead of its like time. Like then we were opened up in a space where people didn't really know what a co-working space was.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward 8 years, there's about 20 of those in the same location that we originally started in. But back then, everyone's like, what's a co-working space and why do you need one? But that's where my podcasting and love for podcasting was born, from doing workshops in that space.
Wow, that's amazing. I love how both of your backgrounds are, straight into entrepreneurship. I'm curious, was your family like that as well?
No, actually. Well, I could say my father he was in sales. So as you know, when you're in sales and you're working commission generally, and then he did start his own business later with another partner. Yeah. So that probably sort of fit in, because I remember one thing from the beginning. I always told myself that I would never work for anybody else. And when I did, I actually went and worked in radio and sold radio for a while, and I was miserable. I loved like when I went out and met with my clients and went out and did the work, but having to report to a location and be in a meeting and wear a suit and tie, which was ridiculous because I was going out to, places where the people are looking at me like, is this the IRS showing up or what? But yeah, so it was for me, I think that really, and like Michelle mentioned, I went probably straight. Once I learned sales, I started going into other things. I was like, what do I like to do? Yeah. And that's when I started getting into personal training, and I was able to use my sales background to really help me thrive in that position where a lot of other trainers didn't have that. Absolutely. So that really helped out.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember when we first, our family is zero entrepreneurship background, right? Our mom works at a college, our dad is a chemical engineer and he's been doing different things, right? And so that jump, that bug was in there from very early on, and we grew up playing soccer. That was the North Star, like that was it. And then when that was not achieved for XYZ, there's different episodes where you share that stories, right? We're like, what now, right? But that feeling of I don't want to really work for somebody else, or the need of maybe resources, right, to bring maybe the family here. We might not have mentioned that before, but it's like, okay, that's how it starts, right? And then it starts to evolve into serving, right? And how can we find these solutions and providing these solutions to our customers and our clients and our communities, right? So do you guys remember exactly if you had a moment like that where you were like, this is what it's all about, right? It's not maybe about the money. It's not maybe about, it's about serving each other. Michelle, you mentioned the co-working space and doing these workshops in there. Evans, you too, when you transition from sales to something else and your initial online business, right? Was there a moment where you guys identify as in, this is my light bulb moment as an entrepreneur. I need to continue doing this regardless of what the output is?
I had definitely a light bulb moment when I was working actually in sales as well. So it's funny, Evans, we both went from sales to personal training to
right.
So I was doing sales for a ski and snowboard tour company. How cool is that? And I also did sales for a whitewater rafting company. But I remember sitting there in the ski company, and they came into the office and they're like, the father of the owner, it was brothers that owned it, and he's like, they're grooming you to take over this one day. And I just was like, no, like my life just shut in. I was like, oh gosh, I feel like I'm in jail. So that was my light bulb. Okay, well, I love taking people out on the weekends. We had so much fun going to all the ski resorts and skiing and partying on the weekends, but was I really making an impact in their lives? No. Which is why I was like, well, I want to do fitness. I think that I can really help people, inspire them to get motivated and get fit and making more of an impact in their lives. So for me, it was making an impact in someone's life was always the goal for being whatever business I was starting.
Wow.
Yeah, I have to say the same thing. I look back, and I didn't mention my mom before, but my mom was a school teacher until she quit working. And I remember when I was a young child, she used to take me, we did Meals on Wheels together. We did volunteering together. And as I got older, when I got into health and fitness, the reason I did that was because before that, I'd been at a point in my life when I wasn't healthy. I wasn't taking care of myself. I was not feeling good about myself. And then I started exercising and I saw everything change, right? And I wanted to give that to other people. So like Michelle, I wasn't in it for the money per se. I just knew that I could help other people and impact them and serve them. So I think I really get a lot of that definitely from my mom, even though she wasn't an entrepreneur. That bleeds into my entrepreneurship today.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. I relate this to, you start seeing the change you want to see in others when you see that change in yourself, right? And Evan, you mentioned at the beginning that you'd never really reflected on your entrepreneurial journey until you started like podcasting, and I think that is key, right? Because most people don't really sit down and reflect on their journey. And it was the same for us. When we started podcasting as well, we started sharing stories and we're like, wow, I didn't remember that one of, like 10 years ago. Like, look at that. For example, when we were kids, we would go to this kind of like market, a little sketchy market back home, right? That our dad used to take us in. And we would buy soccer jerseys. Counterfeit soccer jerseys, but like I mentioned in another episode, even the Cubs at home, they would go and buy their stuff in that market.
Different environment.
Yeah, different environment. But the point is, we would buy them and then we would go to school and resell them, right? And at the point, we didn't know that was like some sort of entrepreneurship, trade, whatever. We were like, oh, we just need a little bit more money. Then when we came to the US, like my brother mentioned, and we had that need for money to first survive, then we wanted to help our family come here. I started doing the same. I was dressing up, going to restaurants, right? Trying to sell them things. And I felt so awkward. Not myself, definitely. I mean, look at myself right now, right? Like my hair is all crazy, the big beard. And at that point, I was like, oh man, this is so awkward. And for many years, as we try to figure out and do different things, I personally didn't feel that good with myself because I didn't like, I knew we could help the other person accomplish their goal through whatever we were doing. But since it was something that I haven't done specifically for myself, I was like, I'm just selling them something, right? And it wasn't actually until we started being consistent at publishing and we started seeing those results in ourselves. And for me particularly, it was mainly the effect that it had in me, the podcasting, talking, putting my thoughts into words. When I noticed that difference is when I got that reflection and I was like, I want other people to feel the same exact way. Like, this is awesome. With this, I can help them. And I think that's when you can call it your motive. My motive changed in that moment. I was like, this is way more aligned with who I am and who I want to be and, the people that I want to serve with. So let me go with that, right? So I just wanted to share that a little bit because first, the importance of reflecting in your journey, it can have, a lot of positives, I'll say, and it can just bring some thoughts to light. And then second, because I have a follow-up question for you guys, right? And we talk about this moment where everything changed for us, but was there a moment where things maybe could have stopped for you, right? Like that resistance moment where you said, this is it, no more, I can't continue, right? I'm about to quit. Was there a moment like that in your life?
You want to go ahead, Michelle, or you want me to jump in?
You go ahead. I'm thinking about mine.
Yeah, I could say there's been a lot of moments, right? I mean, I actually wrote about this in a book that I was published in a chapter. I talk about failure, and the way I look at failure is so much different now than the way I used to look at it. Now I look at it, and I mean, guys, y'all don't know this probably, but I'm over 50 years old. So it took me almost 45, 48 years before I started looking at failure with a positive lens.
Wow.
So if you're younger and you can do this sooner, it can really help. And it's something I try to teach my daughter now. But, when we talk about, I'll reflect this to podcasting, and I'll do it real quick so I don't hog the microphone too long. But when I was working with the podcast you mentioned before, where we went from zero to $500,000 in 12 months.
Yeah.
We were at a stretch, and I was the marketing and monetization strategist behind this podcast. My partner was the voice. He was the expert, the attractive character. And we had gotten to the point where things, we had grown the audience, right? We had gotten it to where I put in a strategy that was very proactive. You guys would probably love this because you get out and you like just start putting out content, right? And do it in a consistent, proactive way. And we grew to 75,000 monthly listeners.
Wow.
But we hadn't connected the monetization to it yet. We hadn't gotten consistent with the lead generation. And we had like a small team and we had ourselves to pay and we weren't making money. And we were really probably about a month from just stopping.
Yeah.
And we went to Funnel Hacking Live for the first time, started meeting. It wasn't what was being said on the stage. What was awesome was what was being the conversations we were having with other entrepreneurs and ones that were farther ahead on the journey than us. And they started giving us ideas and helping us, serving us, right?
Yeah.
Just, hey, well, have you tried this? You should try this. Maybe do this a little different. That's great, but maybe you should tweak this thing. And so we started listening. Then we listened to a lot of the stuff that was being taught, you know, from Russell on the stage and some of the other entrepreneurs. And we went home and immediately took action. And we created horrible sales videos. We created, I mean, we just basically, I mean, they were not good, but it was that action in that first, you know, taking back the ideas, the ahas that we had and not worrying about whether they would be successful, not worrying about the result, having expectations. We just dove headfirst into them. And from that moment forward, we went from almost shutting down to coming back. And that's when the revenue just started going through the roof. And we had a lead generation system in place and we took off. And next thing you know, we were at 150,000 plus monthly listeners. And within 12 months, we had hit that $500,000 mark. So, we were that close to quitting, though, just that close, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's impressive. I love these stories. They're extremely motivating. Michelle, what's yours?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I have a few stories. I mean, my dad was an entrepreneur as I was growing up, but we always used to tease him because he was like a serial entrepreneur. He was losing businesses, lost front and center, and being successful at businesses. Like, so it was always like this. But I always had, you know, seeing him fail sometimes and then seeing him be successful sometimes, I think really helped me being okay with failing, like, and being okay with like taking that opportunity and running with it and seeing what happens and not being afraid of making that leap. So, you know, I would have to say like our co-working space was not a success because it was so far ahead of its time. And when I was at home as a new mom, my business brain, I was already in fitness. My business brain was going to mush. And this is where I turned on to the Apple TV and I was like, what's this purple app called podcast? What is this thing? And they started listening to it. But that listening to those shows actually changed my life around because it was my business brain was going to mush and I was like getting a little annoyed with our co-working space, wasn't going anywhere. And then we were trying to find like a daycare space with a co-working space together in the same like building, but the bylaws, we were too advanced for the bylaws. They didn't understand how that can happen together in one building. And, you know, it was getting frustrating. And so we were about to just say, forget it. When this podcasting thing, I put my earbuds in and every Monday morning I take my son for a walk and I listen to Jamie Tardy's Eventual Millionaire. And I swear that show really inspired me and motivated me to keep going and keep listening. And, you know, it was from there that I fell in love with podcasting when I recognized it was in my car. It was in my on my Apple TV at home. And I talked to my mom friends about it. They'd be like, what are you talking about? What's a podcast? I'm like, that's really, I'm like, why is nobody listening to these things? They're amazing. They're changing my life. And so I kind of had that like radar saying like, this is something to pay attention to. It's not quite there. This is like in 2012. So this was like long before it was ever popular. But it's like, this is something to pay attention to. So start learning about it. And that's when I started kind of getting interested in it and just seeing the impact it was making on myself. Really, it was like, well, if I can have that impact on myself, what could me helping other people get their shows out there, imagine the ripple effect that's going to be. And so I always had this in my mind. I want to be like the Hay House of podcasting. Let's change some lives and help those podcasters that are going to change people's lives. Let's help them get more visibility and get out there. And so that's kind of where the seed got planted for me.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's so fun. We love to hear the stories, right? Because as entrepreneurs, right, like we relate that there's always going to be those moments along the way. And same thing. A few years back, I used to think like, man, like this is the end, right? Like, oh, what is it? But then I related it. Like to me, the output was let me relate it to my soccer, right? Because let's say in a game of soccer, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the sports or if you guys are fans, but in the game, there's more failures than successes, right? Like inside of the game, right? Like you try to dribble, they'll take the ball away, right? Sometimes, right? If you succeed, sweet. Then the next pass that you gotta make. Sometimes you make a mistake. Sometimes you don't. You shoot, you score, you don't score. So there's a lot of like these interactions within that same game. So for us was okay. Can we relate our day-to-day operations on the business side of things with this thing? And normally that will happen with every single sport as well, right? So that's why maybe sometimes we see that relationship between athletes, military, and business, right, is very strong because those type of people are very resilient, right, to failures. But then we enter this entrepreneurial world or publishing world, like to be very specific too, and we put our message out there and we test messages and we test stories, right? And sometimes we get into that mental state of like, man, like this might not be good enough, right? This might be like, maybe I'm not okay with failing, right? So how, if like that, somebody with that background can think that, maybe people that don't have that background might be even more challenging, right? So, within yourself, is there anything that you guys can pinpoint and be like, this specific action helps me move forward, right? Like once I identify, what is your framework? Like, what is your framework to like, as I identify this friction point, how do I move forward, right? What is, do I take a learning lesson? And maybe with you guys and with your clients that you guys help every single month. Anybody?
That's a good question.
Yeah, so good. Yeah.
You know what I heard. I actually heard this on a podcast as I was driving home this weekend, and I think it was Byron Katie, who Michelle may know who I'm talking about, but I don't know much about her. But she was being interviewed, and one thing that stood out to me that I think can help anybody is that we all sort of have that imposter syndrome. Even, I hear people who are very, very successful, even like somebody that we all might know that's in our circle, Alex Sharfin, who said once, he every time he cuts on the microphone to do a podcast, he has that sort of moment that hits him like, is this going to be good? Am I good enough to do this? Should I be sharing this? Almost that imposter syndrome. Yeah. So it helps to know that other people, even much more successful, go through it too. But one thing that I heard that she said that made me sort of be able to switch that like voice in my head was when that voice in your head says, like, oh, they're going to just think this is dumb if I share this. Just ask yourself, is this true? No. Is this really true? Right? And then once you start asking yourself, is this true? Then obviously you're like, well, how do I know? I don't know what they're thinking. So of course, no, it's not true. And so you can sort of mentally shift your mindset a little bit by just asking that question and moving forward. But I think a lot of it too has to do with just one thing that I know Michelle and I have done some classes together where we've helped groups launch podcasts, and we've talked about fear, and she probably has a lot of more experience than me with this. But the one thing that I always tell everybody, and I used to really get stuck on what are people going to think? What are they going to, and then once I realized that if I'm just myself, my authentic self, and don't worry about what's coming from the reaction for what I say, don't have an expectation about it, and just be yourself. And I know sometimes that's hard, but you'll stand out and your message will connect with the person that it's supposed to connect with.
Yeah.
We aren't made to connect with every single person in the world. There's probably, like if only 10 people out of 1,000 connect with what I have to say and it helps change their life in any small way. And like Michelle mentioned earlier, then the ripple effect from that continues and continues. That's massive. So that was a little bit of a long-winded answer, but that's I just don't really have a clear path, but that's how I do it. I'm like, is this true? And am I being true to myself?
Yeah, I like it. Michelle, with your experience with like the 200 shows, right? That can be very common. We just had a call with somebody that launched her first episode not so long ago. Like she's not a client. We just were on an awesome call. And we told her, like, you already did the hardest part. Like, you put out your first episode. Wow. And she went into, like, her story and her fears. And I'm like, you're so far ahead. Like you're so far ahead, and it's incredible. So what are, through your experience, your own experience maybe, or with your clients, like what is something common that you see, and how can they move past that?
Oh my gosh, yeah, there's definitely some major things that happen and roadblocks that stop people from actually ever getting over that hurdle. And I know these so well because I had all of them. And it actually, from the time that I got hooked on podcasting, I was like, I love this, I want to have my own show, to the time that I actually launched my own show was a lot of years, because I was happy helping other people do theirs, but I still didn't know what I wanted to talk about. And I didn't know what I wanted to be known for. It just, until I realized it was podcasting really that I couldn't stop talking about. So finally just gave in that that's what I'm going to talk about. And, so I see it. It's like that in action. We have a tagline at Amplify You is like our podcast management agency. And so the tagline there is actually, your uniqueness is your genius. And so you can remember, and if we can instill this in our clients, that like there's nobody else, no matter how many people that are going to talk about soccer out there on a podcast, your position on it is going to be so much different than someone else's, right? By the way, I played for 23 years. I love that game. And so I think keeping that in mind, and then we also have another saying where if you are not embarrassed by your first few episodes, you waited too dang long to get them out there. So that's the imperfection, like the massive need for perfect is actually causing that stalling, and it's causing people to just stall and not take action and not move forward at all. So imperfect small action gets you to the end game every time.
Yeah, I love that imperfect action. And I'm always surprised by the capacity of humans of like self-sabotaging themselves, right? And it's a problem that I feel everybody deals with. I actually saw, I saw a TED Talk of somebody that had I think it was like a $4 billion company. And he was talking how every single time he goes into a meeting, he is having those thoughts as well, right? Yeah. And he's like, no, like, look what you've accomplished, look what you've gone. And like, he has to talk himself out of it. So it is very real at whatever level we live at, we're at. And, social media, I feel in a sense, it doesn't really help as much, because then everybody's comparing themselves to others, right? Which is like a terrible thing to do. So if you're listening right now and you are comparing yourself to others, don't do it. The only person you should compare yourself is to yourself yesterday. Are you better than where you Are you better than what you were being yesterday? I think that's not the way you say it.
Ish.
But ish, language barrier. So, I love all that. I think that is incredible, and it takes practice. It's a skill that people need to develop. Like you said, imperfect action with consistency, and they're going to be able to move past that. But I do want to, transition here a little bit about the podcasting type of things, right? And the first question that I've had since the beginning is, what have been some of the changes that you guys have seen in the last couple of years? I mean, 200 shows, that is amazing. I'm sure you've noticed some trends. What is happening in the industry? I know it's growing a lot. So yeah, I'm just curious to see what is the current state of podcasting.
Oh my gosh.
I'll let you run with this one, Michelle.
I feel like you serve such a small little piece of the podcasting space. And so where we really shine with our clients, like we've gotten really good at helping them, especially since Evans and I have joined together, is that knowing how the entrepreneur can have a successful podcast that connects with their business. Because what we're seeing is so many, someone started a podcast because it was a great idea and their business is over here, but the two don't talk to each other. And so Evans has been amazing at coming on and helping people kind of, together we can connect those things, those pieces. And so as far as the state of podcasting goes, oh my gosh, I still believe it's in its infancy stages, but I do believe that the small piece that we serve is very different than the rest of the space, where they're going after ads and sponsorship and growth through Patreon or those kind of things, and really concerned about download numbers, where we're really concerned about impact, a return on their investment, getting people back into their business and promoting their own programs and services through their ads and sponsorships like you guys do, right? I feel like that is a very different breed of podcaster. than like I would say 95% of the rest of the podcasting space. So
Yeah.
however long, like, been in the podcasting space since 2012, but it's been this little tiny piece of the actual industry. So it's been interesting to see how fast the industry's been moving and how much it's become more like radio and how much it's become more based on ads and sponsorship and lots of money, which is really interesting because that's totally not the kind of podcasters that we typically work with. And they've been seeing a huge success in their business and huge success in their podcast, but it's through a very different kind of way, using it as a leverage and building relationships and making an impact, which is very different than I think what the rest of the world is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. We received a text the other day from a group that we're interacting with, and the question was, what do you guys think about the new iTunes subscriber, the new phase that they're rolling out for paid memberships inside of the iTunes, right? And my answer to that was like, look, like I think like, especially us, we're in a different position. Like this is for people that might be monetizing their content itself, like that don't have a business or they don't have a service, they don't have an offering on the back end to help the audience that they're serving, right? This is the content, see the content as a product. People like you mentioned, people that are going to Patreon, people that are going to all other platforms to monetize different layers within their content, right? Because there's nothing else on the back end. So to us, really, I mean, we put everything out there. You guys put everything out there in these conversations, in these interviews, right? It's out there. It's available to everybody. And then the next level comes on the business, right? So I guess my question to you, Evans, is like, how do you, I mean, obviously the show is called Content's Profit, right? So how do we connect, right, the content to the profit? That's the secret sauce, right? Like, what is that process? Does that process look the same for everybody that doesn't want to be on the sponsorship side of things, right? Is it individual to every business? Is there a framework that people should start following?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it depends on where you are in your journey as an entrepreneur too. But to go back to what you're saying, I think the most important connecting part that a lot of people miss, if we're talking about just like one thing, and this goes back to your Apple podcast question too, right? Another shiny object that's getting thrown out there and it sounds so good. We get to monetize, but yes, you get to make some money if you get people on the private podcast through Apple. Yes, they're going to take some of that money. That's not my concern. Where you don't benefit is you don't get to know who those people are that are paying for your podcast. You don't get any contact information. You don't get the prospect, the lead. Yeah. And when we talk about where we succeeded, when I was mentioning that story earlier about how we were about to close down and we came back, we made some changes. The absolute biggest lever in our business that changed with our podcast was not a lot of changing the podcast itself. That was really dialed in. Yes, we changed a little bit about the messaging to get people to take the next step. Because for us, it's always, what's the next step? What's the next step on that journey? Yeah. But for us, it was when we figured out a way to create a lead generation system that wasn't a transactional lead generation strategy. It was transformational. It was relationship building. It's similar to what you guys do when you put out all of that content, not just one piece of content, right? You're not just making one exchange for that. We did the same thing where we're like, okay, we are going to give you this ridiculously valuable item, which for us was a members area. By the time I left, over 200 free things in there to help you grow your business. Wow. In exchange for your email address.
Yes.
That list, and then that gave us the ability to continue to keep a discussion with these people, right? Where we were saying, not come buy our thing, not buy our thing, not the transaction, but the relationship. We just gave you something new in there to help you grow your business. We just, we showed people, like Michelle mentioned, the relationship aspect that we wanted to serve and help them. And when I went back and looked at the numbers, 80% of our highest value clients and customers came from that list, from going into that system. They were the ones that spent the most, that bought more than once, that ascended to our high ticket programs. And that's part of the integral piece of the pie that I teach now to my clients is, you know what, we're building a relationship with our leads. And that's what's really important, that a lot of people, and I've actually been going back and forth. And it's funny you brought this, so you're going to get me on a rant, but I know we don't have a long time for a rant. But I've been sort of thinking to myself, why do we continually ask people to go to Apple to review my podcast instead of asking them to go here to get into my world on my platform, to give me the email address so I can cultivate that relationship further? Because you build the relationship in the podcast itself and you deepen that through great content and giving value. But then if you can get them to give you your email address and treat that like it should be treated, not just as a, hey, you gave me that thing, here's my thing, go away, I'll send you a broadcast in 3 months when I've got a sale, right? It's continuing to cultivate the relationship.
Yes.
And that's the lever that connects from the podcast to the offer. So then, you have the offer there. At that point, selling and closing and getting clients is not hard at all because you've built so much trust and reciprocity.
Yeah.
And I was in a discussion with one of our mastermind leaders about this, and it came up where I started calling it the reciprocity selling and scaling system.
Yes.
Because it's all about serve before sales.
Yeah. I love it.
And it's transformational, not transactional, right? Like that's really key. I think what Evan's saying there.
Do you think is it that people don't know enough about this, or is it that people are scared to implement this system?
Or maybe is it that they know it takes hard work to build these relationships?
Boom. Yes.
Yeah. It's work. It's funny because I saw Frank Kern talking about this. I love Frank Kern because he's just so, he basically says the way you help people or way you get people to buy things from him is to actually show them that you can help them, right? Demonstrate that you can help them by actually helping them.
Yeah.
And he was talking about follow-up, and that everybody loves the tip of the iceberg, the attention, the getting your content out there, doing the podcast, getting the content out there. But exactly what you said, as soon as you move to that next phase, it takes some actual work. But it doesn't have to be hard work, but it just takes some effort. And I don't know how many people, I don't know any statistics, but I would just say that if 90% of entrepreneurs just had a good, strong reciprocity, relationship building follow-up system in their business, it would change everything.
Yeah. I remember when we first started, consciously going into the entrepreneurial world, one of the people that we were following at the moment was Grant Cardone, and he's like very aggressive salesman, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I remember the most was that he was like, the sales isn't the follow-up. The sale isn't the follow-up, right? And yes, like he is a very aggressive salesman, but put it in the context of what we're talking about right now, building relationships. A lot of people tend to keep these relationships in a very reactive manner. It's like, oh, I'm going to, have a first contact with someone and then I'm going to wait for them to be interested and come to me. When it's like, no, be proactive about it. Follow up with that person, not necessarily for the sake of, hey, I'm going to sell you this on the next follow-up, but you're building that relationship transformational. Now I'm getting to understand what your pains are, what your problems are.
Share something that might help them, right?
Exactly.
Like introducing to somebody that could help them as well. Like we never know. And that's a fun process to start exploring. And we definitely encourage, if you're listening to this right now, like go try it out. Like how can you serve that person that you're trying to work with, right? That you want to serve? What is the next step? So, Michelle, do you have any tips on that? I feel like
that's actually one of my favorite strategies when it comes to podcasting, because that's why I have a podcast. So I can lead with like, hey, I want to get to know you better. Can you come on my podcast? And then, or like, I'd love to have you on my podcast, showcase you, elevate you. Then we can have this conversation. I can get to know you. And that's just the beginning of that relationship, right? So the podcast allows me to lead with serving someone first and doing something nice for them. That's what I love about podcasting like so much. It's that relationship building in there. I think it's really key.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. We're such in the same page right now, guys, just so you know. And we always say, like, some of the friendships and relationships that we've developed in this last year that we've been doing the podcast, I mean, there's no other way we would have or made those relationships otherwise, right? It would be so challenging to get in contact with, you know, for example, yesterday we had Glenn Lundy here on Content is Profit. Like, it would be so difficult to meet him in a room, right? When instead you can, like he said, you can build your own table and then bring the people to your own table and build those relationships. I think so. It's so important. Personally, if I could pick one thing for people to learn, right, for you, the listener, to learn from this conversation that we have today, is be proactive in building those relationships and build your own table. Don't be afraid to build your own table and bring them to your table. So thank you. This is amazing. I know we're coming out to the end of the hour, but we have a few more questions.
We have 2 more questions. So it depends how long. It's fine. We have time. So it's up to you. You guys can go. And Evans, you can rant if you want. So here we go. So what would be, and it could be 2 action points since it's 2 of you, 2v2, a special. What is one action point that people that are in this space of starting their ventures, right? Or they have something built and they are thinking about publishing. They're thinking about putting their message out there to multiply their message, right? Be present, be loud. What is something that we can tell them today that they can take action immediately and start getting that momentum?
I think I have a good one right now for that. Is that, you know, how we prevent like pod fade or like content fatigue, right? Is like, we see it when people don't get, like I like to say, like, we don't peel the onion back far enough. So you haven't quite got the right content if you feel like you're going to run out of things to say after like 10 or 12 episodes or like 10 or 12 pieces of content, right? So a good little like trick I like to say for this is like, just do a huge brain dump on a topic. And if you can get past 100 pieces of topic, 100 pieces of content within the first 15 minutes without stopping, then you know you've hit a content topic that you can like carry on for a long time, right? Like, you know, you've peeled the onion back far enough. Yeah. And if you can't, if you run out of steam or run out of ideas, then you got to dig a little deeper. That's going to prevent that pod fade for sure.
Yes, I love it. Evans, before you go on this one, I want to share a quick story. Like for us, when we first started the show, the first 20 episodes is me and my brother, right? And it was like, let's get the message out there. You know, the first episode is our story a little bit. And then we started talking about things that were happening in our world. And then around episode 20, we were like, oh, we hit that wall, right? That you mentioned. It's something very real. And we're like, what else do we talk about? Do we talk about the same thing? Like, what are all the stories that we're sharing? Like, and then our solution to that at the time was, let's go interview people. Right, let's learn from them. Let's build these relationships, right? And it evolved into the show that it is now. But yesterday, also having that conversation, we're not with Glenn, especially like he's been publishing about 800 episodes. He has the largest Facebook morning show in the world right now, right? And he's like, every day that when I identify that I'm like running out of topics or things to say, is because I'm not learning enough. I'm not, you know, putting myself out there. I'm not growing enough, right? So that on the personal side of things, like his personal growth side of things. So that's also great. And I love the dump. It's like, write it out. Like, do I know enough? Do I actually don't know enough? If no, we gotta research and learn more, right? Do we have to continue growth? So thank you so much for that tip. Evans, anything else that you want to share with the audience? With us?
Yeah, I would say, you know, the biggest thing for me is it can feel very lonely. I mean, you guys are lucky you have 2, right? You're together there. So that's awesome.
So, sometimes that's not such a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, right. but as a solopreneur, solo podcaster, if you're just starting, it can feel a little lonely and you're like, oh my gosh, you know, what should I do? And you can go watch 1,000 YouTube videos, take a course, whatever it is. But I would say the best thing to do is just ask for help. You know, reach out and find somebody that has done it before, that's been there before, and ask for help, even if it's just in a way to get some positive reinforcement. I remember one of my when I moved from behind the curtain as the marketing monetization guy to actually doing my first one, all I could think back on was like, we had this machine, right? Like it got recorded. I had the plan in place to grow it, to make money. We had a funnel. We had everything put in place. We had an editor. And so when I went to do it myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, all I could picture was, I don't have this. I don't have that. I don't have this. I don't have that. How am I going to do this? Yeah. And I reached out and asked a friend just to have a conversation. And his best piece of advice that I ever got was, he's like, reach down next to you. He's like, do you have one of these sitting there? I'm holding up a phone for those listening, right? And he's like, pick that up, open the voice memo app, press record, start talking, press stop. You just recorded your first podcast. Now just keep going.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's amazing. So those two things, right? Just ask for help and then just take the first step. But asking for help is always, going to bring massive benefits.
Absolutely. There's that saying that it takes 10,000 hours to, become like an expert in something. But guess what? I personally think probably the only shortcut, and I'm doing air quotes here, to something is leverage somebody else's expertise, right? Like go find, like you're saying, Evans, find that person that is that expert, or somebody that can help you move a little bit faster in that place that you are right now, and go to them, learn from them. And then eventually you're going to need something else, and you're going to find that other person that's going to be able to help you with that other thing. But yeah, sometimes I feel like people, back to relationships, are so afraid to being proactive in that sense as well, and reach out to those people that can help them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh. All right, guys. You ready? Last question.
Fire.
Last question. Are you a lab person or a Chihuahua person? No, I'm kidding. That's not the last question. Last question. Probably your favorite question. We mention it all the time. Where would you guys be if you did not publish?
Ooh, that's a good one. Probably be thinking about all the things that I should be talking about on my podcast while sitting in a room by myself. That's not very exciting. All those ideas would probably stick in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I would feel stuck, unmotivated, miserable, really, because it's huge knowing that, what I have to share and the message I have and the mission I have is just not serving who it could serve. So yeah, it would definitely be a lonely, stuck place. I'd be back to my old days of just doing freelance copywriting and, making good money, but working many hours, so I wouldn't have time for these folks behind me. So it would not be a fun life.
Yeah.
I also think like the fear of my own voice would still be real, because I think exercising my voice and like having conversations like this all the time and producing content with your voice on it, I think has really helped to strengthen my voice and give me confidence to know that I do have something important to say that people do want to hear, and that is going to make an impact in someone's life.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Do you guys hit it like right on the spot? Right, it's about that one person that we can help. Right, it's I remember when we first started our first 45 Live challenge, we kept looking at that little corner with a number, right? Who's watching? Doesn't really matter, does it? Like, because like, well, first off, people are going to come back to it. If you do it the next day, you have another chance, right? Like if we talk about frequency all the time, but even if there's one person, that person is paying their undivided attention to you, and you can help them, right? And then imagine how, I mean, we did this exercise. Imagine just 5 people in front of you, like talking to 5 people. That's intimidating, right? Like that can be very intimidating. So the fact that why do we, keep that into that person? So going back to Michelle, what you're saying, like, and Evans too, like that message that comes and we can impact so many. And then we have a solution on the back end because we're connecting the show to the business side of things, and we can help and serve people. So good. So definitely for you, if you're listening and watching, please go follow them. The links are going to be all in the description. All you got to do is scroll down and click there and get in contact with Evans and Michelle, because it's incredible.
If you don't want to scroll, Michelle, Evans, where should they go?
We can find us at my Podcast Coach Facebook group, where we both hang out lots there and give lots of content out, or follow us on Facebook.
Awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, find us. I love when people reach out on Facebook and say they've heard me on a podcast. So you can just Evans Putman on my personal profile, shoot me a message. Just don't try to sell me Bitcoin right away. The first message. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, I love that connection. So I'm always happy when people reach out and say, I heard you on this podcast, and can we connect? And wherever that goes, wherever. But it's just nice to know that that message resonated enough for somebody to reach out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Guys, please go and connect with them. My Podcast Coach, that's the name of the Facebook group, right? Awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, join it. And also, you guys do kind of like a mixer happy hour where you guys have a lot of podcasters in there. Can you share a little bit more about it? Because I've been to one of those and I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I actually got to meet some new people. So tell me a little bit more about that before we leave.
Yeah, Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time starting next week on May 5th is going to be our next one coming up. And it's called the Podcasters Connect and Collaborate. So our goal is to connect people who have shows with people who want to be on shows, vice versa. Come and meet some other podcasting friends. You never know who's going to be there. We typically get like 40 to 50 people there, and it's been amazing. So many people come out of there with like 5 or 6 interviews booked, and it's really cool. So our big thing is connection and community and collaboration. So we love just seeing everyone get together, meet each other, and our worlds kind of colliding that way.
Yes.
Love it.
So if they come to the Facebook group, to My Podcast Coach Facebook group, and join, then we always go and post in there when the next one's happening. Then they get on our email list and we let them know so they don't miss it. So that's one email that gets like a 80% open rate. So right there.
Party time. People like to party and meet people and connect.
Yeah.
That's so good. This is what's so fun about this platform, and just making the table. It just gets bigger and bigger.
Just get bigger and bigger. That's right. Thank you so much. Yes, this has been amazing.
Yes, it's so good. Any last thoughts before we say goodbye?
Yeah, when are you coming on Amplify You? We'll interview you guys. Can't wait for that one.
Thank you. Let's do it. You tell me. I mean, right now it's fine. We'll
just log out on the other one.
Switch. Yep, that's it. But yes, count us in 100%.
Absolutely.
We'll share some fun stories too, including when our dad was throwing rocks at FONZI. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Yeah, there you go.
We're still loving, by the way.
I appreciate you guys having us on for sure. We're grateful for the opportunity to share.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a pleasure sharing the message, and especially if it's helping these incredible entrepreneurs that are moving forward and creating that momentum. So awesome, guys. With that said, thank you so much for tuning into the Contents Profit Podcast. Go ahead and follow the show in your favorite platform and go to social media at BIZBROS Co to catch all the golden boulders.
That is right. And if you find today's episode impactful and is helping you move one step closer to your goal, please don't forget to share it. And I was going to say leave a 5-star review, but I'm going to say go to contentisprofit.com.
Yes!
So you can join the family. Let's go.
Let's go.